I kind of stumbled back, Brigid, from. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Have you got me?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I came from a construction background, Brigid. I'm a carpenter by trade, so when the downturn hit back in 2008, 2009, I was always farming anyway with Dad, but my sole occupation was carpentry. And when the downturn hit, it was decided that I'd come back and start farming again. And we were still on the same conventional train of mindset, working away, ploughing away, tilling away, and doing everything according to the script. So,
fair enough. And for anyone that hasn't been to your farm, what does the farm look like, or what type of farm is it? What kind of land is it?
It's a heavy clay, loamy soil, calcium-based soil. It's a difficult enough sort of soil to farm because it has that heavy texture in it, and when it gets wet, and when it gets dry, it stays kind of dry, but it holds the moisture better than, say, a sandier soil. It's very hard. Like, when we were ploughing and tilling, it was very hard to get a seed bed. When we were sowing, it was very hard to get a seed bed because what we ended up was with balls of clay, really. And some of our worst soil, you could make pots out of it. I reckon, it's so loamy, like, or so silty. But through the last couple of years there of sowing cover crops and different managements, it's starting to turn back and it's starting to become more workable, and there's more root structures coming into those body lumps of clay, and breaking it up and putting more oxygen down and putting more carbon down, and it's just becoming far more workable and far more fertile, I suppose you could say, in a sense. Like,
so about 5 years ago, you obviously changed. You were saying that it was a conventional tillage farm, and then you changed. Can I ask what was the pivot moment, or why?
I suppose everyone's sick to death to hear this story, but it was lack of earthworms that got me thinking, and then bigger machinery, bigger tractors to pull ploughs through heavy ground that didn't want to be turned over, and when it was turned over, it turned over in a slab. You could beat that ground with a sledgehammer and you won't break it up, you won't get a seed bed out of it. So it's quite soul destroying ploughing up ground like that, and tires slipping and smearing, and it wasn't enjoyable. So that was the biggest eye opener. And then I got talking to someone, a friend of mine in Kilcock, Paddy Blake. He mentioned this guy David Wallace. He was running the soil course, Port Leash, I think, and I went there, and David blew the doors off the hinges for us when we started studying soil more. Then he brought us down into the biology, and look at it. It's a rabbit hole we've gone down now, and look, it's a far more interesting way of farming.
It must have been daunting starting that journey. I mean, you felt like you were flying solo, or was there a group of you starting it together? Or
there was, something. I was lucky enough to be on a course with the chairman of Base Ireland at that same course. Johnny Green was the chairman at the time, and we all had to speak at the course and say where we came from and what we were farming and what we were doing, and that terrified me for a start anyway. And Johnny spoke a couple of rows before me, and I heard him speak, and he spoke about Base Ireland, and he spoke about what they were doing, and what they were a group of farmers, and they were educating each other, and they were learning from their mistakes. And before the day or the evening was out, I tapped him on the shoulder and said, how do I sign up? Like, and took a while, but we got there, and I'm a base member now for 6 years, I think, 7 years nearly.
right. Yeah.
But it opened my world as well to other farmers that were doing, like, it was nearly a community, or nearly family now at this stage because I've gained so many friends and connections through it, you know.
Great. So just going back to the farming system, what were the first things that you changed when you changed? Where, like, if you were to do a step by step?
The very first thing we would have done was we would have started with cover crops. So I had to prove really to Dad that everything would work on a small scale before we moved it across to the full end of the farm. So maybe 10%, and I have 25 acres of my own beside my house, and I moved everything towards cover crops at that stage, and I moved a 10-acre field of his towards cover crops. And we came back in then with spring beans after the winter cover, and that was very successful, and you could see the difference in ground and porosity and soil structure and everything after the first year of a cover crop. And then we followed on with that with a winter wheat, which was very successful. It did very well here on this farm, which is, we would have always said that it won't work here on our soil. It's the first pitfall you hear whenever you speak to a farmer. They all say, "Oh, it won't work here. It's grand for you over there, but it won't work here." And I proved that wrong here, and it opened up my dad's eyes as well to say that it did work, and we started to push it across more onto the rest of the farm then.
Do you find you have are there certain cover crops that you would use in rotation or every year? Like you were just saying that obviously that's your success cover crop, but would you always use that? Would you change them? Sorry if I'm sounding like a Luddite when it comes to tillage, but I think it's just important for the audience also to know, like, how, like every year when you're coming up to the stage of putting down your cover crop between your cash crops or whatever, how do you make the decision?
We keep them very much the same, apart from if we are coming from the later we get into the winter, into the autumn, the less species maybe I'd put towards growing, because the soil is getting colder, and you won't get the same germination from, say, a warmer species of sunflower, but like the later we get into say September, after the winter wheat or spring oats or any sort of later or spring beans, even like any sort of later sown crop or later harvest crop, we will scale back on the cover crop seed. But we grow 50% spring crops and 50% winter crops, so it's a fabulous opportunity to get early sown cover crops in after winter crops. So winter barley we'll get in July with cover crops, and they get up and they get established and they get cover in ground and they get deep rooted. We get in warmer species, like, so we grow buckwheat, sunflowers. Like in September, say, you'll get some bang for buck out of them if it's a mild September and October, which this year is. It's actually been phenomenal back end and on autumn. You'll get bang for buck out of the buckwheat and the sunflowers, but the first 0 degrees or minus half a degree, they'll die out. Like, so we'll base it on that. Like, we'll base it on how early we're sown or how late we're sown in the autumn.
Do you mulch them back into the soil, or what do you do with them?
Sometimes we will, yeah. I have kind of devised a system where you probably heard it being talked about. We call it the double cover crop system. So we'll take 20 acres out in the year or more, maybe probably more this year, the way things are lining up. But we'll grow the winter cover crop throughout. From coming off the back of a winter barley, we'll grow a multi-species cover crop right through to April, and we will cultivate the ground for that and come back in with a summer cover crop with more warmer species, and as much diversity as we can into that, because it's a fertility building. It's fertility building, and it's structure building, and it's turning poor performance soil into productive soil, and it turns land inside out. Like that's
Okay. I don't know if it's my internet or yours, but one of ours is kind of going a bit wobbly here. We might have to turn off our screens in a minute, but maybe the people in the crowd could let us know whose internet is dodgy. But anyway, so roughly what percentage of soil disturbance do you do these days? Norman, I think you're going to have to turn off your video.
Yep.
If you don't mind. Because we've kind of lost your...
So very little in the autumn. Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of missed the beginning of that, I think. So roughly what percentage of soil disturbance do you do these days?
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Sorry, it's just when you turned off your video, it's got better.
We won't.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
Yeah.
We won't disturb any soil in the spring or in the autumn. Sorry. Yeah, and it's very much dependent on the crop and what has come before the crop. So some crops are lazy and they don't like a bit of nurturing, I suppose you could say. So spring barley is really the only crop that we'll cultivate beforehand, and possibly the summer cover coming in off the back of the winter cover, depending on how good the cover has been beforehand. So spring barley definitely needs a little bit of a tickle of something just before we sow. So
Okay.
be that something like we have experimented in that we have tried double sowing. So what we'll do is we'll sow 60-degree one direction with the spring barley, and we'll come back and sow it either 180 or another 60-degree back the other way. And what it does is it creates a small bit more tilt in soil, and gives the barley a little bit more mineralization and gets it to take off just that bit better. We figured that out by when we were sowing the combi crops of peas and barley. I didn't have seed on time for mixing them together. So what I did 2 years ago with that was we went and sowed the peas probably 2.5 inches deep first, and then I came back over with the barley and sowed a different direction at maybe an inch.
Okay.
And I think that created that small bit more tilt in the soil, and it just gave it that bit more mineralization to get going.
Okay, so it's kind of
that'd be our main
disturbance. Is that right? Norman, you mentioned in the
look,
video...
it's as much as necessary.
Yeah.
It'd be as much as necessary when it comes to... Sorry.
Okay. You mentioned in the video you inoculate your seeds.
Yeah, look, for tillage on the farm, like it's as much as necessary. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're crossing over each other here.
Lag there somewhere, I think, is there?
Yeah, there is a delay. Norman, you mentioned in the video you inoculate your own seeds with biological feeds. Can you explain exactly what this is?
Yeah, so originally, Brigid, we would have set up an injection system on the sower. So we were pumping down biological feeds down with the seeds at the seed zone. So we're putting seaweed and humic and different K&F stuff and vermi extract down with seeds. But I found we didn't get much bang for buck with it. it was probably evaporated by the time the seed needed it or the soil had swallowed it. And look, I'm sure it didn't do it wasn't doing any harm, and it wasn't it was finest. But through probably talking highly about seed dressings and biological seed dressings probably 2 years ago, and we trialed a bit there with. There was a guy that was doing a bit of cleaning for us, and many years ago, he used to do seed dressings for us. And I mixed up a bit of lactic acid bacteria for him and asked him to put it on the seed for us. And we only dressed a ton, but that was 2 years ago, and for the whole growing season, you could see that dressed seed with the lactic acid bacteria on it. Throughout the whole growing season, it was greener, it was taller, it looked healthier, it looked happier. It was a mind-blowing moment for us, like, to see that. And I think Dad didn't trust me. He thought I had done something fruity or put more fertilizer. He thought I had done something sneaky anyway, but I hadn't. It was just literally, it was literally just that. And look, from that moment on, I think every seed that's been put into the ground here has had that biological dressing, and we mixed that lactic acid bacteria ourselves, and we're mixing OHN, which is a KNF input as well. It's called Oriental Herb Nutrient. It's like an antiviral. Small bit of fermented plant juice. It can come from any sort of plant, so we're mixing with nettle and Japanese knotweed. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. But
well, if it doesn't spread on your land, I mean, that's...
No, it was literally just the extract. So you were taking what that plant was doing and putting those sort of hormones into the seed. But
I've basically all heard that Japanese knotweed it's, I mean, I shouldn't say this either, but it's apparently one of the strongest herbs for cancer. You know,
it's medicinal, like, yeah. But look at that. We've started anyway, and I can't really get off the wheel because every year it's getting better and better, and I'm mixing a bit more. And we made our own composter there with worms, a vermi composter just out of an IBC. And coming up to sowing season, I'll add a bit more water to that, and I'll drain off the vermi liquid from it, and I'll add maybe a ton, or I'll add a litre and a half to a ton of seeds, along with the humic and along with the seaweed and along with the KNF stuff. So it's basically what it's doing is it's introducing the seed to the soil biome, and it's giving it the interaction and the kindness at the start, rather than holding it back at the start. It's starting it off to the best start. It's like the colostrum to an animal or a baby. Like it's what you start off your seed at the start, you continue on from there on, you know.
The other thing I noticed when looking at your video is that when you have a crop, you actually diversify your seeds within that same crop. I mean,
that's right.
Do you find this, you do it for resilience, or, I mean, why do you do it?
It's diversity too, like, you know, every one of them is going to bring something to the party. Every different variety will bring something to the party, whether it be resistance to pests, resistance to fungus, or scavenging nutrients better, or better rooting capabilities. Like they all bring something to the party, and be that good or bad, like it's still diversity. Like, and the more you can have in diversity in that sense, the better, like, you know.
Yeah. And I've heard you say also that your soil smells healthy. I mean, instead of asking you to describe what that is, perhaps you can describe for me what unhealthy soils smells like, or do you know what I mean? Just so that, I mean.
Yeah, look, I know, I understand. Unhealthy soil to me smells like it's sour, or it's anaerobic. So, you know, we would have thought we were doing great chopping straw and ploughing it back in, and that was the mindset, and ploughing it as deep as you could to get drainage down as deep as you could. You know, when you see that straw coming back up again the following year in very much the same state it went down, only just black, it has that soury smell. Like it's not vinegary smell, like, but it's not. It doesn't smell healthy. Like you wouldn't. I nearly can't. I can't describe it. If have you ever been to a forest, like, and you can smell? You know, it's not the same. It's a soury sort of smell, and it's compacted, and it's just
alive.
Yeah.
Great,
You know?
great. Are you able to measure like your soil carbon sequestration, or is that's not?
Yeah, I think we are. We're due another round of soil tests. I should have done it in September this year, but I was just too busy, and I just never got around to it, or never got asking anyone to come and do it. So I'd probably have to wait till next autumn again. We're probably 3 years down from the last comprehensive soil test that we've done. So
it'd just be interesting in the kind of
it will, and
before
it's
after
itching me.
kind of.
Yeah, it's itching me to know what's after happening, but you can actually see it in the soil itself that it's gone darker, it's gone more aggravated. Like it's and it's just you can see an awful lot with your eyes and smell and touch, like, without having to do any of that sort of stuff. But it's important to have that sort of science backed up behind it. You know, well, for people that would doubt it, or it's vital to see it, like, you know.
I think again, yours is an interesting story because it's transitioned from intensive to non-intensive, you know, so to regenerative. So it's kind of showing how much can be achieved in.
When it comes to tillage, Brigid, like, we're not against tillage, like, but it's as much as necessary and as little as possible, or thoughtful, gentle movement of soil. That's, you know, probably the worst invention that ever came onto our farm was the power harrow, because previously to that we were running. We probably weren't as ploughing as deep for a start, say pre-2000 or pre-99, and we were running with probably a leveling harrow, which was on a triple K tine system with a leveling bar and a crumpler roller and an old Massey Ferguson drill, which was all very gentle movement of soil. It wasn't pulverization that we would have brought in with the power harrow, because what it was doing was mixing profiles of all sorts of soil and burning carbon out like there was no tomorrow. You know, and we had our best yields, I think, ever on the farm from the introduction of the one pass system with the power harrow.
Okay.
And a couple of years down the line, then we would have moved, having to give it 2 runs of the power harrow, and then give it a run of the one pass again. Like, so all that adds up, and it all costs, and the soil was starting to degrade as well as a result of it, like, you know.
Okay, so ultimately now your soil is more productive than it was 5 years ago, I assume.
We're back to normal production this year, but we would have been back a small bit previously starting out, because it's like getting off a wheel. Like, you can't just stop everything like that and expect the same results. You know, we've cut back on inputs, and we've cut back on sprays, and we've cut back on fertilizers. So you're going to get an instant impact with that straight away. But with the cost of the reduction of the fertilizers and the sprays, like, our margin is still very much the same as it would have been previously, and it's probably going to go and get better as we get further into the system and we build more resilience. You know, it's not a case of just stopping and expecting the world and its mother to turn on your side. Like, it will take. It's going to take time, and
is it more work?
You can't undo 30 or 40 years of intensive, well, not intensive tillage, but you can't undo something like that out of a can, or, you know, you can't expect to put some magic bottle on and fix everything for you in the case of, or in the course of a growing season. Like it, we're 3-4 years into the system now, and I can see it starting to turn now, and Dad can see it, which is like, he has to be able to see it to make it work, or
Yeah.
to believe me, or believe the dribble that comes out of me to
That's
you
brilliant.
know.
And is it more work, Norman, or is it
No,
then?
look, do you know something? We've learned to farm again. So we put ourselves back in touch with the soil, and we've learned how to farm again and learned our own agronomy. It's more pleasurable to walk your own land and know that you're making your own decisions, and you decide exactly what you're going to put on or what you're not going to put on. Or as I heard someone saying by a farm, I think it was Johnny Green again actually, that said it, that doing less is probably better than probably trying to do as much as what's going on, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And have you
it's
seen much difference in the kind of the bigger picture of wildlife and biodiversity on the land?
of
Or
course, yeah. If you look at the birds have come back in, like, I probably wouldn't have been as clued into it at the start as Dad would. Like Dad would tell me, "Geez, I remember them when I was a young fella. Like I remember them, and skylarks, like any of these ground nesting birds that we're not disturbing ground, and we're creating habitats in there for them. You know, like they're flourishing, like as a result, and as a result of that, then there's predatory birds, and there's more life. There's as much life above ground as there is below ground. Like it's there's more, like, I have never seen as many frogs as in the last 2 years, say, and I don't know whether that's a good sign. Some people will tell you that's a sign of a wetland, or it's a sign of no pollution. Otherwise, like, and
indicator
look,
species, yeah.
exactly, yeah, and look, birds of prey are back, like, tenfold. We've I can't narrow it down to how many barn owls we have. We definitely have one or two anyway, and we've long-eared owls as well. And there's a guy walking the farm there during the summer, and he told me we've a family of otters running through the river that runs through our farm as well. So I was told that was a great sign of things that were, you know. So
just very quickly, I'll ask you one or two more questions, and then there's a few coming in from the crowd. And so if anyone wants to ask Norman any questions, do write into the chat box, and we'll ask Norman the questions. Do you think, Norman, your outputs are more nutrient dense, or is that hard to measure?
I'd like to think they are anyway, Brigid, but the only way we have of actually measuring that is through bushel in our corn or in our cereals, or and they're up, like, and we've held our bushels well. It's probably something I'm going to have to go down the line of testing to see what exactly is happening within the whole system, and are we getting the output out of it in nutrient density.
Yeah, because I'd say it's hard enough when you have a longer supply chain to kind of get that extra support from anywhere.
Yeah, well, it is. I've heard it say that, like, you know, I'm not picking out any industry or any farming industry in particular, but it's just a dairy farmer will know from his milk tank what he's feeding. He'll know by the end of the next day if it's good or bad.
Yeah.
Or, you know, whereas we have to wait till the end of the growing season to find out exactly what we've done, good, bad, or different. And weather comes massively into that too. Like, you know, if we don't get sunshine at the appropriate time, or we don't get rainfall at the appropriate time, you know, it affects everything massively. Like, and 2018 was a massive learning curve for me there too. When we hit drought, the whole country hit drought in 2018, and, you know, our soils, that after winter barley and after winter wheat, you could I could fit my hand down up to my elbow in the cracks that were in the ground.
Yeah, well,
you know, it was just a massive eye opener for me. And
how
Look,
fragile
I solemnly believe now that if that weather pattern hit us again like that we would have more resilience built and more organic matter built in the soil, and we'd be able to hold more moisture and bind more of everything in the soil. So I think going forward that we're working better. We're definitely working better towards building that resilience.
So to the naysayers, you think you'll hopefully have the last laugh?
Well, I don't know. Like I wouldn't like to say that now at all, but I definitely think it's building for the future anyway. It's definitely,
Yeah.
Sure I am.
So Norman, I'll just ask a couple of questions that have come in. The one from an unknown person has said, how does Norman deal with weeds?
Look, we spray. Definitely, we do spray. I spray. I'll stick to a normal sort of a herbicide plan, but where we can get away with it, we'll try. I'll definitely try to get away without spraying. Like I think 2019 or was it 2018 that we got away without spraying for weeds on spring barley, and our spring beans. I don't spray any tactical herbicide. We will spray a reduced or a half rate of glyphosate with a fulvic acid and a citric acid, along with a seaweed, just before, either just before or after sowing. So we do roll, like we have experimented with other stuff like there with cover crop destruction. We have rolled in the frost at -2 and -3, and we've had good results with that too. But look, it's a learning curve the whole time. We're still only. I'm still no expert, Brigid, and I'm still only learning. We're still all only learning. And look,
that's the nice thing, isn't it? Is sharing what you have learned.
Exactly. Yeah. And exactly, and what we haven't learned too. Like that's.
Yeah.
It's as important as learning as, or it's as important as discussing as what you have learned.
Yeah, exactly. So Barry Donovan asks, how do your average yields for barley and oats compare to before? Are they gradually increasing over the years?
This year, we've matched our normal plough yields, so we're back to where we would have been probably sooner than I would have thought, but I actually put that down more to weather patterns this year, because everyone did very well this year on their yields. So I put that down to weather this year, and I had allowed nearly 5 years before we could see any sort of build up or benefit and climb up the graph, as you say, in yield. So we would have been back maybe a half a ton normal yield wise, but we would have cut back, so we might have been using only one fungicide as opposed to maybe 3, what normal people would have been using. And we're back on everything. Like, it's relevant to the end product. Like it was tough this year because the price of grain is so good.
Yeah.
So maybe we should have been pushing that bit harder. So look, it's very hard to call it. So next year we're stuck on that commodity wheel. So next year we could be back to, I can't see it going back to a bad price, but it's definitely going to be relevant because the price of inputs has risen fourfold or fivefold even, like at this stage. So maybe this year was the year to be pushing it, and we should have maybe, but look, we're trying to build resilience, and by pushing too hard you're going to go backwards, like,
I'd say there's a few people that might be perhaps looking for an alternative because of the prices this year as well. So it's,
look at everyone wants the silver bullet.
Yeah.
It's not, it's something that you have to be doing gradually, not slamming down a sledgehammer and expecting it to work for you. So
yeah,
it's going to take time.
Okay, so Will Gabbett asks, hi Norman, apart from the mindset, what has been the most difficult aspect of conversion from conventional to regenerative agriculture? And if you turn back the clock, how would you approach your conversion to regen ag differently, starting from scratch?
you very much, Bill.
So what's been the most difficult aspect of it, and would you approach it differently if you were to do it now?
Probably the most difficult was trying to convert my dad at the start. Anyway, like Dad was doing what he always did for so long. It's very hard to tell a man that's doing what he's done, and he's done it well up until that, like, and to tell him that, you know, we're going to stop doing it like this and we're going to do it like that. That was probably the most difficult, but by showing him in the flesh and showing him everyone else's different soil types, and soil types like ours and soil types like lighter soils, heavier soils, like he could see the progress that could be made, and what can be done on poor soils and on good soils, and how you can transform soils. So
yeah, I think it's a credit to both of you for embracing it, like you say.
Yeah, it's a credit to him more so, because I didn't go head on, and I suppose he saw it for himself, and he had to witness it for himself before he decided that it was good. There was no point in me going and saying this, and this, and that's how we're going to do it. And he embraced it, like, in fair play to him. Like he's taken it all on the chin, and he's actually pushing boundaries more nearly now than I am at this stage. So
there's two of you. Well, there's, you know, more hands make light work.
Yeah.
And Will, I suppose the second part of Will's question, would you approach it any differently now if you were starting out now?
I would approach it better with more on the compost route. So we've only really started broadacre composting in the last year, and we were kind of experimenting up to that, with spreading a little bit here and a little bit there. So I'm actually kind of glad that's the way it worked, because we were sorely a cover crop growing operation in the regenerative scheme, or biological scheme, I suppose you could say. That I could see the difference that the cover crops were making in soil, that what they were doing for soil. We have to see that firsthand, and I'm glad that the compost or organic manure didn't get the claim for it, because the cover crops have been working away there quietly in the background the whole time, unknown to yourself or anyone else, like what they're doing for water quality, and what they're doing for carbon sequestration, and what they're doing for biology, like pumping down feed. They're like a
They're like the tortoise compared to the hare. Yeah, they're kind of
exactly. Yeah, they're transferring energy into the soil there the whole time through photosynthesis. And look, I'm glad that we saw the difference. Like 2018 was the first biofarm conference, and I was asked to bring my best soil and my worst soil to that conference, and our worst soil was the worst soil on show for biofarm 2018. It was you could have literally made a tea pot out of it and put tea into it, and it would have held it. So I've witnessed that soil transform now, that there's root hairs getting down into that lacky soil, and it's like we've harrowing that soil. Like you could have harrowed it to death all year long and you wouldn't break it up. And if you dig that soil now and you take it up in your hand and take those marbles that would never break, you can break them in your fingers with the root hairs that are going through that. Like cover crops have done that.
Yeah.
And yeah, but the next progressional step for us now is the composting and the organic manure. So
just building on that.
Yeah. So that'll be my answer to that.
Brilliant.
Would be how we do it differently. Would be to add the organic manures and the compost along with the cover crops.
Yeah. Perfect. So Sean O'Farrell asks, hi Norman, have you figures for increase in soil carbon emissions, I suppose?
Organic matter.
Organic matter. Okay, thanks.
I haven't yet, but I think I've moved up a couple, like 1 or 2% in organic matter, definitely, because you can actually see it in the soil. It's darker. Look, it's very hard to explain that without me showing you some soil in one hand and showing you some soil in another hand and explaining it.
Yeah.
You know, it's far easier to show it in person. And look, if you're coming out for the Farm for Nature walk, I'll demonstrate that clearly to you.
I was just going to say, we'll tie you in for a walk next season. You'll be grand. You can show the whole.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, no, but that's for sure. And I'm due another round of testing. I have done the comprehensive test across the whole farm before we started as a baseline figure, so that we'll know have we gained or have we lost. But I doubt very much if we've lost, because you can see visually already what's happening. So.
Fair enough. So another anonymous person has said, is Norman making bigger money now or not, is the question.
I'm making more margin. It's like, it's all well and good turning over money. Like, you can turn over money to beat the barn, but if you're not making money at the end of it, like,
yeah,
what's the point? Like, it's I don't know what that old saying is profit is sanity and turnover is insanity, or I don't know. There's an old saying for it anyway, but I'll make a hint of it anyway, no matter what way I say it.
Yeah.
But you have to tailor your inputs to suit your outputs. Like, so, like, if you're pumping the whole time there, gung ho, you need to be getting gung ho back out. And if you're not getting gung ho back out, you're not the winner. The man selling you the stuff is the winner.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, like, just on that, I mean, I think it's fair to say the biggest losers of this whole regenerative farming and tillage is the industry. And
of course, yeah.
You know, while it seems to be a benefit to the farm, to the land, to the pocket, it's hard maybe to get that message out there, is it? Because the noise from industry, do you find that?
Absolutely, yeah. I'd be seen as kind of mad for what I'm doing, but look, I know where I'm going and no direction I'm going, and I know exactly where I need to be. It's not going to hurt my pocket at the end of the day. That's the way you've hit the nail on the head there when you said that. It's going to hurt industry, but I think industry is well able to turn a different
with the tide.
And they'll be very quickly to turn around and say they have a new product, a biological product that'll mimic
save the day.
Reduce. Exactly, yeah.
And like, on the madness side of things, you know, you're a 400-acre farm, so you're not a 4-acre farm in the corner of some, you know.
That's still a small farm though, Brigid, for a tillage farmer. So,
I know, but you probably have a few neighbours, and like, do they look over the fence kind of going, what's the crack with this fella? I mean, do you feel
they did initially
mindset change?
They did initially, and they would have kind of sneered and laughed a bit, like, but I get more phone calls now from the same neighbours wondering, looking for advice or looking for what they should do. Or, look, as I said to you, I'm no expert, and I can only speak for what we do here on our own soils on our old farm. But they're definitely more open to the information now. And look, there seems to be a lot more hunger at the minute for this type of information. It's coming at me from all angles. It's coming at everyone, any of the lads in base from all angles, coming at Danny members from all angles. I'm sure it's coming from any of the Farmer for Nature ambassadors at all angles. Like, it's not, everyone is hungry for this information and hungry to take back a bit of their own power and a bit of their own decision making and just get a grasp of their own land again, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important, like, on that. I mean, if you were to say to, you know, the conventional farmers, like, where you get your advice and support, like, where can they go to get on tillage farming? Where can they go to get advice and support for starting out in this direction?
If you look at it, was Base Ireland that got me started, and I still will revert back to Base Ireland to get this information. And it's a fantastic community that they'll share positives as well as negatives, and it's more important to nearly share those negatives. That what didn't work is massive. Like, it was from Base Ireland that I got picked up to join Danu Ireland to the EIP project of the biological farming. So I owe everything to that to start off. And look, we all excel individually off the back of that then, and we all share that information back through those. Like, it's farmer empowerment. Like, it's literally those small groups are leading the charge on biological farming, organic farming. Like, it covers all angles, you know.
I think also because there's no, it's not. There's no industry behind it. There's no, you're not sharing.
No one's going to win from it. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's just a knowledge share, and so therefore, like you say, you can share what doesn't work as well, and that might help. And you are all groups, experts on your land.
Well, we're not experts, but
about your own land and sharing that.
We're experts about our own land, and we've on boots on the ground experience.
Yeah,
you know, it's none like. None of those groups are entertaining any industry, and there's no one sponsoring any of the projects or anything that's going on. It's literally farmer led. There's no vested interest in anything. So it's all farmer led, you know.
Yeah, no, that's good. So just going back to the questions here from our listeners, the next one is, what's the next change you will implement on the farm?
I'm going to go deeper into combi crops.
Combi crops, so, okay.
Yeah, so we've already been growing peas and oats and peas and barley, and for the first time this year we're growing, for the first time ever, I'd say, a winter pea with a winter oilseed rape with companions of berseem, clover, buckwheat, and facillium. So we've stepped it up again another notch, and like, there is other guys that are stepping it up far more than I am, but we've never grown a winter rape on the farm here, and we're surrounded by equine industry all around us. So we have had numerous phone calls from neighbours asking where flowering mustard cover crops oilseed rape, that it was bad for horses' respiratory system. So I have to be very careful about how I approach the situation. Like, so, I've kept that plot. It's a 10-acre plot of a test plot that I've kept it away from any sort of equine neighbours. So
interesting. It's all part of a bigger ecosystem, isn't it, of neighbourhoods?
It is, yeah. Look, but I'm hoping to ramp up that companion and combi cropping thing, that we can. It's the next step in diversity that we can. You know, we're multi-species cover cropping already, so it's the next progressional step to take, is by growing 2 or 3 crops together and trying to harvest them together and trying to separate them then once they're harvested, like so.
Great. So the next question is, does Norman think his farm is more stable now than in the long run?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's more stable now, and it's going to be more stable going forward in the future. It's not a, we're building the sustainability, and we're building the, look, it's I can't even think of the word. God, I'm gone brain fried altogether. But
you've done very well.
Tune out now for a while. But it's we're building resilience. Like, this is the future for the future generations that are coming behind me. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Tommy Early asks, how many variety of oats would Norman recommend to plant together, and any advice on a feed on seeds?
On a feed on seeds?
I presume on a feed for seeds, is it? On a feed for seeds? Like what you feed, the inoculation maybe?
I don't know. Oh, maybe that's right, yeah. So on varieties, I'd get as much as I could. That'll be my answer to that. We've only mixed 3 varieties of oats so far. I'd love to ramp that up another bit. And I did grow those 3 varieties with peas as well. But you can actually see the difference that the peas will make to that soil, like especially if you can get those legumes down that small bit deeper below the seed zone of the oats, that they will eventually start to interact together. And the legume is renowned, or it's well known for its nitrogen fixing capabilities, but in reality I think it's making calcium more bioavailable in soil, and I think that's where the bang for buck is coming out of the legumes. I'm gone way off course to Matt's question, I'm sorry. But
the advice on feed for the seeds.
The feed, look, keep it simple to start with if you want, and maybe just go with seaweed and humic or vermi, like any sort of vermi extract or liquid. Or the next progressional step for me is probably to build a Johnson SU bioreactor composter. That's what I have planned in my head at the minute for hopefully December, January, but I won't be up and running till probably autumn next year, by the time I get some valuable compost from it. But the plan for that is to make a slurry from the compost and dress the seed with it, and it's a fully biological dressing on seed. It's a fully biological dressing on anything or any sort of it's fully, oh God.
Yeah, do you know what? You're okay, Norman. You're coming to the end anyway. But does it fully cover it? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mary asks, will Norman experiment with more natural weed killers in the future?
Look, I have experimented with vinegar and Epsom salts. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. There's so many variables that come into play in that sense, that air temperature, soil temperature, how strong the plant is. You know, like I said, we've been rolling in the frost, and that's not going to stop me again in February or January if we get that temperature down. We need the temperature to be below at least -2 to get that to work, and I have had fantastic results from that here at home in the farm. So
okay,
I'm never going to rule that out, that we will, like, if it comes in January, February again, I'll definitely be back out with my roller, and my neighbours are going to think I'm daft again, out rolling at 4 o'clock in the morning with lights on, like, you know. So
there he goes.
Yeah, here he is again.
What's he at now?
Yeah.
Well, listen, finishing up, your last question for me really is, like, if you were to give one top tip to farmers, like a conventional farmer, on where to start with bringing, say, more nature onto their farm, what would the one top tip, if you were running down the motorway and they were going the other way, what would you be screaming at them?
I don't think there's any one particular tip you can give, Brigid. Like, there's numerous tips you can give, and numerous small things, like small changes make big differences. And cover crops were probably the biggest game changer for us here, for wildlife. And hedge cutting, like the mere leaving hedges to be cut till springtime or till February or March, you know, it's leaving those berries on the trees or on hedges that little bit longer and letting wildlife take them. This year, I suppose, for the first time, we've had pollinator strips on the farm. Not for the first time, but for the first time, what we've done is we've left those pollinator strips run their course, and we haven't mulched them or we haven't done anything. So They've gone to seed. They're there. They're a fantastic feed source for birds. Like you can see it all year long. You can still see it to this day here. The small birds that will literally land on a top of an oil radish or a mustard or sunflower. Like they literally land. They're flourishing off the back of the feed that's grown on that. Cover crops, I hands down on the table, I'll say, if you want that, without even the natural biodiversity that it'll bring resilience to your soil, it'll bring water quality, it'll bring energy to your soil. It ticks so many boxes that I can't even begin to nail it down to what it should. But that'll be the first thing I do, and maybe take 10% of your farm and grow a cover crop after a winter barley, and watch what it does to that soil come springtime of the following year.
Brilliant. Norman, listen, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
No, you're fine. No, it's probably more gremlins on my end than it is on anyone else.
And but look, everyone stayed with us, so that was a good sign. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, and you know, it's really nice to have such kind of eloquent people like yourself speaking about this area and spreading the knowledge and sharing the knowledge. So thanks very much. Keep up the good work. If anyone would like to see a short film on Norman's farm and his father's farm, if you go to our YouTube channel, the Farming for Nature YouTube channel, it's up there. And if you know of anyone that would like to see this evening's Q&A session, a recording of it will be up on our website or our social media within the next day or two. Hopefully we'll be having a farm walk on Norman's farm next year. So if you sign up on our newsletter on our homepage, you'll get more information about that when our farm walks are opening. And we do have an online forum for any questions that you want answered by fellow farmers. The next session is on the next Q&A session is on the 30th of November. We have Nia O'Malley, so you just register through our farmingfornature.ie. Until then, thanks again to Norman. Thanks a million for joining us, and thank you to everyone for joining us as well. Goodbye. See you next time.
Thanks, Amanda.